Greetings to all of my pals, and any others who happen to stumble upon this review. It is I, Empyrean Serpent, and I return to this land devoid of hope that we call YouTube to bring you some more quality content. For today we will be looking at another new album, and since I've done a lot of power metal recently, I've decided to change things up a little bit. Therefore, we will be taking a look at a death metal album, and more specifically, the Scythe of Cosmic Chaos. So, starting things off here, the Scythe of Cosmic Chaos is the third full-length album by German death metal band Sulphur Aeon, a band which I personally follow and am quite a big fan of. Sulphur Aeon has been active since around 2010, and as is somewhat evident, the band are big fans of Lovecraftian themes, which is something that I greatly appreciate myself. On top of that, those thematics show through greatly in every facet of the band, with their stunning album artwork, their lyricism, and the music itself. However, without any further ado, let's get into exactly what makes the Scythe of Cosmic Chaos one of the best death metal albums of 2018. As mentioned prior, the thematics of the album are very much Lovecraftian. The album cover alone is probably the best rendition I have ever seen of the Haunter of the Dark, and the album itself is swathed in a vast oceanic atmosphere that essentially makes you feel as if you're drowning. The cult-like ritualistic clean vocals used on the album add greatly to this effect, as does the overall crushingly heavy sound. It definitely emulates the themes set forth to a great effect, and one can't deny the Eldritchian feel that this album just oozes. On top of that, what I can make out of the lyricism is pretty high quality stuff, further cementing the atmosphere and themes, and adding to the cosmic horror vibes that are present. On an individual level, the musicianship here is pretty damn good as well. The technical skill on the guitars is pretty evident, with some damn high quality riffing throughout the whole album, very good implementations of tremolos, and some fairly impressive lead melodies that carry through. That alongside the occasional solos on here certainly cement the performances there. Percussion on here is definitely better than what one would usually find as well. Although it is reasonably straightforward, there are a decent bit of interesting fills, and very consistently they add lots of flavor and impact to the songs. While there is arguably a bit to be desired there, it certainly isn't much. The vocals on this thing are definitely one of the more flavorful parts as well, and there's a lot of interesting variants going on with them. The growls and lower harsh vocals are extremely powerful, hitting with some really great impact, and the screeches and other higher harsh vocals on here are just as impactful, juxtaposing the lows very, very well, and having a rather piercing and chilling effect. Combine this with the cultist chanting you'll get here and there, along with the interesting vocal lines, and you've already got a great basis with the harsh vocals alone. The cleans add another dimension of strength to the vocals, having a very eerie, ritualistic feeling, with some very, very nice haunting melodies. Overall, the musicianship on this thing is pretty damn excellent, and it carries through to the masterful songwriting very well. Speaking of that songwriting, it's certainly one of the strongest points on the album. The song structures are all interesting and varied, the band's evidently taking some progressive approaches with the album, especially considering the over 9-minute track on this thing, Sinister Sea Sabbath. Even the shorter, more straightforward songs make very good use of progression without getting too confusing or anything of the such. The main driving force with the album's writing, though, would definitely be the riffs. There is essentially not a single riff on this album that is not impactful, heavy, and memorable to some degree. Each one is crafted excellently, and they are all top tier, as I can honestly say very, very little that would properly emphasize the quality of riffing on this album. They offer a strong basis for the rest of the music to work around, going along perfectly with the unnerving, crushing Eldritchian thematics, as well as the atmosphere. Building off of this incredible bass, the melodies on this album are pretty damn great as well, lots of them being just as catchy as the riffs, if not more so. They blend extremely well with both the spooky Lovecraftian atmosphere and the rest of the musical components, and they tend to intertwine with the riffs really well. Not to mention the vocal melodies on the cleans are very effective, being super haunting and imposing, leaving off a pretty spooky feel, not dissimilar to that left by the guitar lines. As somewhat prior mentioned, the writing for the percussion is somewhat straightforward, but again, there are some very nice fills here and there, and it's all done in a way that optimizes the impact of the drums very, very well. Returning to the atmosphere of this album, it plays a fairly big part in what makes this thing so enjoyable, As prior mentioned, it fits perfectly with the Lovecraftian themes of the album and evokes a feeling not at all dissimilar to being drowned in a torrent of dark, crashing waves. Spooky stuff, I know. Those waves, of course, vary in intensity, as though the peaks of the album are absolutely crushing. The songs have some masterful build-up to those points, many sections often starting out more grim and foreboding as they then ramp up in intensity. On top of that, you have the aforementioned spookiness that's present as well, what with the foreboding and partially unnerving atmosphere. This being especially present around the ritualistic, clean vocals, as it adds the edge of mystery to that already crushing weight of the album, giving it that much more Eldritchian spin. The production on the album does a pretty good job of keeping everything in check as well, and the mixing for the instrumentation and vocals is quite on point, and the slightly murky production definitely helps build the atmosphere to what it is. Although, in that sense, I would say that it might be better off a bit more rough than it is currently, as the production is a tad on the cleaner side here, which is especially notable with the percussion at certain moments, considering it seems to take away a lot of the impact that could be there. That being said, it is still certainly more than serviceable, and it does work very well with the slightly more melodic tendencies the band has going on at times, but regardless, I do think it could use more of a depth. However, that would pretty much have to be my only complaint here. As you can see so far, it's a fucking high-quality album, so without further ado, let's dive into this track-by-track section, and try not to drown while we're at it. So the first song we have is Cult of Starry Wisdom, and it is definitely quite a nice way to kick off the album. Great atmosphere on the build-up, gives off a very spooky, aquatic vibe before shifting right into some damn good riffing, accompanied by some really nice percussion and melody as the ritualistic clean vocals rise up, before giving way to some more spicy lead guitaring. A great way to kick off both the song and the album, and the song only gets more intense as the instruments ramp up and the vocals turn to harshes. The chorus on this thing is great, super catchy riffing and vocals throughout the song. Overall, it's a great and very memorable way to start things off. The transition into the next song, Eugothian Spell, is a pretty damn quick one, as it blazes to life almost instantly with chaotic riffing and melodies that make an excellent lead, before it slows things down a little bit, drawing out a bit more of an atmosphere and building up a much heavier feeling. Evidently, this song feels a lot heavier than the last, and the riffing on here is pretty damn insane as well, certainly some of the best on the entire album. The vocals are varied as usual, though even more memorable on this song I would say, and it's got a great sense of progression. Easily one of the best tracks right there. The summoning of Nyarlathotep definitely takes a much more straightforward approach to its build-up, having a slower, calmer intro that slowly drives up the spooky atmosphere and intensity before getting into the verses and choruses, both of which are pretty damn catchy. The lead guitar melodies and vocal lines are actually much more the driving force of this song in terms of memorability, I'd say, and in that sense they both do so very damn well, especially with the cleans on the chorus constantly chanting Nyarlathotep. Some nice progression as well, and the leads on the back half of the track where it shifts to a more melodic focus are surprisingly uplifting, and it definitely leaves a great lasting impression. Although the entire album is basically a highlight in and of itself, this is another one of my favorite tracks, I'd say. After that, we get thrown back into the heavier, more aggressive riffing style with Veneration of the Lunar Orb, certainly a bit more of a straightforward track in those senses, though it does have some good progression throughout as well, and the riffs and vocals are certainly quite heavy and memorable. The track definitely has quite a more crushing atmosphere as well, and the slower sections that serve as build-up are done really well. The ending is quite a nice release as well on this one. Next up we have Sinister Sea Sabbath, and it is probably the song with the best build-up on the album, most likely due to its sheer length. This thing is over the 9-minute mark, making it easily the longest song on the album, and did I mention that it's one of the best? Because with its impressive build of atmosphere and crushingly memorable riffs, leads, and vocals, it certainly wins out pretty hard. Not only does this song have some of the absolute best progression on the album, it easily evokes the best of the spooky aquatic vibes throughout the album. This combined with the melodies being some of the most memorable, as well as the solo on here easily being the best on the album, certainly puts the song near the top, and ultimately I'd probably consider it to be my favorite track, or at least tied for it. After that monolith of a track, we have one with a more standard song length, but a much longer title, The Oneironaut, Haunting Visions Within the Starlit Chambers of the Seven Gates. is probably one of the catchier songs on the album. It starts off with a strong and very catchy melody before heading into the riffs, which are also quite catchy in that regard. The initial melody line thankfully persists, and on top of it, we get some other quality melodies throughout. Though there isn't as much progression as the other songs here, it's still evident, and it allows the track's melodies to shine through a bit better, making it overall extremely memorable. The atmosphere on this thing is pretty damn strong as well, as the more calm parts definitely invoke some heckin' spooky feels, I'd say. Coming close to the end of the album, we have the track Lungs into Gills, and it is another more riff-focused track. This one definitely has some of the more present harsh vocals on the album, and they work quite nicely with the riffs and melodies here. Not much progression, but it does bring the riffs pretty nicely, and has a very nice ending to lead into the finisher of the album. Not too much more to say on that track there, but yeah, it's a good time. So the final track we have here is Thou Shalt Not Speak His Name, and it starts off similarly to the intro track, actually, bleeding in with some cool, spooky aquatic atmosphere before shifting into some very striking riffs and melodies, which then ramp up into the main song. Not only is it instantly pretty damn heavy, but every riff and melody on this thing is catchy as hell, and things only get more so as the song progresses. Speaking of, the progression on this track is definitely quite nice, with an amazing build-up and release, as it is to be expected from the second longest song on the album. However, it's also probably the most memorable track of all, as not only does it have a grandiose atmosphere befitting of a closing track, it has some of the best and catchiest melodies on the entire album here on both the leads and the clean vocals towards the end. The build-up towards these vocals is nothing short of amazing, and the vocals themselves are incredibly moving when they finally hit. Overlaid onto the already crushing and unnerving atmosphere, the eerie melodies that they give off are so absurdly fitting that it makes the track feel like such a perfect conclusion to everything up until this point. Easily the most fitting closing track I have heard in a while, and definitely tied for my favorite song off of the album. Overall, the Scythe of Cosmic Chaos is a vast and all-consuming journey into Lovecraft's mythos that will ensure you feel both unnerved and bewildered, and it will more than certainly take your breath away and fill your lungs as its dark, crushing waters wash over you. Shitty metaphors aside, the album is amazing, and certainly at the peak of what atmospheric death metal can do. Instrumentation and vocals are all great, the songwriting and atmospheres are both fantastic, and overall, the album leaves very, very little to be desired. I'll go ahead and use a phrase that I've used before, and I feel like I may end up repeating more than once on this channel, but though it isn't perfect, it's pretty damn close. And in this instance, it is easily close enough to warrant this album a 10 out of 10 rating from me. Definitely one of the best death metal albums to come out this year, and just in general. And I heavily recommend you check this thing out if you have yet to. If you're a fan of death metal, Lovecraftian stuff, or just amazing music in general, this album is right up your alley. And that is all for this fine day. I think I've gotten a bit better with the writing for these videos, honestly, especially considering how I used to draw the track-by-track section out to bullshit lengths in comparison to the actual primary body of the reviews. I feel at this point, though, I've balanced it out well enough so that I spend more time talking about the album as a whole and its components as opposed to the individual tracks, which I personally like a lot better. And I think most people would as well, all things considered. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed this video, my guys. If you liked the review, then go ahead and leave a like. Maybe tell me in the comments which aspects you especially enjoyed, if you would be so kind. And if you have criticisms, I would gladly accept them as well. Furthermore, if you've heard the album and want to leave your own opinions or ratings, then please do so as well, since I would love to discuss the album with you guys. Furthermore, if you'd like to see some similar future content, hit that subscribe button, and past that, hope you all have an amazing day. I have been Empyrean Serpent, and thank you for listening.